Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I am your host, Jay, just Jay, your resident culture warrior, your resident troublemaker. I hope all you beautiful badasses are doing well this weekend. We are sadly at the end of it, but should be a short week for most of us, at least those of us in the States who are got the Thanksgiving holiday coming up on this Thursday. So, should be a short work week. And, thank you for small favors. All right, anyway, I wanted to touch on this article that I saw. It's from earlier today, and it is coming to us from the people over at CBR.com. It is Sauron versus Morgoth. Who is Lord of the Rings' strongest Dark Lord? All right, the Lord of the Rings had two evil Dark Lords, Morgoth and Sauron. But which one was more powerful, and which would have won in a showdown? In The Lord of the Rings, the Valar sent the Astari to combat Sauron and his machinations. Okay, sorry, it's Sunday. It's been a long weekend. There were 5 Astari in total: Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, Alatar, and Polando. They were all Maiar, but they were forbidden from using their powers to dominate, though they could still fight, like when Gandalf killed the Balrog. Instead, they were supposed to encourage and exhort the free peoples of Middle-earth. The reason that the Valar sent the Astari was simple. They wanted to avoid what happened in the conflict with Morgoth. For most of the First Age, the Valar followed a laissez-faire approach to Morgoth and his evil dealings. The elves had ignored the Valar's commands, so they let those elves deal with the consequences of their actions. At the end of the First Age, though, Eärendil begged for mercy and aid, so the Valar intervened and helped destroy Morgoth's influence. But in the process, much of Middle-earth's world was destroyed. So the group of Astari was the Valar's attempt at a less cataclysmic solution. However, that raises a question. Did the Valar think that the Astari could handle Sauron because he was less powerful than Morgoth? A couple of things there before we go any further is, I guess you could say the Valar did have a sort of laissez-faire approach. I don't know. They were sort of hands-off-ish. There's no getting around that, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was laissez-faire. And as far as the elves had ignored the Valar's commands, I mean, so they let the elves deal with the consequences of their actions. I mean, that's true. You do have that, with the departure of the Noldor, and, once the Silmarils are taken, the Noldor do go off, despite the Valar telling them or sort of imploring them not to. But the article kind of makes it seem like, hey, well, the Valar were just like, hey, you didn't listen to us, you have to deal with Morgoth, and that's actually not true. There was actually a war that predated any of that other First Age stuff. It was the war for the sake of the elves, and this was, I think it's something like 300, happens within like the first like 335-ish years from when the elves first wake up. Because Morgoth becomes aware of their presence first, before the Valar do, and eventually the Valar sort of go to war with Morgoth, on behalf of the elves, sort of without the elves asking them to, and it was actually referred to as the war for the sake of the elves. So anyway, I'm just wondering if that's what they're referencing. It's kind of vague in the article, but I digress. All right, so we're at the part where do the Valar think the Astari could handle Sauron because he was less powerful than Morgoth? In the depths of time, Eru Ilúvatar created Arda and the Valar. He made the Valar to help create and order the world. But the most powerful Valar, Melkor, turned out to be nothing but problems. Melkor decided that he wanted to be his own master and create of his own will. When he couldn't accomplish that, he began to war against the other Valar and rule over Middle-earth with his fires and evil creations. With this turn to darkness, Melkor became known as Morgoth. They're kind of playing fast and loose with sort of the way things happen. Melkor, right from the beginning in the Aino Lindole, when they're singing the universe into existence, is already challenging Eru Iluvatar. Melkor introduces discord and disharmony into the song of creation. And so, I mean, yes, his mind was, because he wanted to create, he wanted to make things of his own will. But going to war with the Valar, and he did declare himself the ruler when the Valar first get to what is known as Middle Earth, or Melkor does declare himself that, like, hey, this is mine, like, I'm in charge. To which Manwë, who was the other top dog of the Valar, basically says, no, you're not. Again, it's a very stripped down version of how it plays out, but yeah, that's sort of what sets them off as being opposed to each other. The article, it kind of like they make it seem like it's he officially declared war once he had taken over Middle Earth, and it's like, I don't know. As far as when he becomes known as Morgoth, it's the elves that give him that name. The elves give him the name of Morgoth. He was known to the Valar as Melkor. All right, so let's go on. While at war, Morgoth lured many beings to his cause. The Balrogs and Sauron, who had a surprising reason for wanting to rule Middle-earth, were chief among them. No, they started being swayed over to Melkor right from the beginning. When Melkor, again, when Iluvatar has the Ainur, i.e. the Valar, singing, creating the universe through song, and Melkor is introducing this discordant strain to the song. Some of the immediate Maiar who were around him began adjusting their song to match Melkor's, i.e. he won some of them over prior to the war that he had. Okay, were chief among them, and they commanded substantial power. But they weren't as powerful as Morgoth. From a technical sense, Sauron and the Balrogs were Maiar, not Valar. That is true. That meant that they were designed as lesser beings from the beginning of time. Thus, in their original forms, Morgoth would have easily defeated Sauron in a fight. As proof, Sauron spent the last part of the First Age hiding from Morgoth's wrath after being defeated by Luthien. This is true. Can't argue there. Got no arguments there. It's leaving out quite a bit, but it's nonetheless true. The main thing that Morgoth wanted to do was create and rule, but he didn't have the capability to make life. So he took what Eru had created and perverted those things. In that way, Morgoth created the sunlight-hating orcs, dragons, trolls, and many other evil things. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one. Yet, that drained his inherent power. Basically, Morgoth distributed his own power so that he could rule by proxy, enforcing his will through his creations. That makes a big difference in terms of power scale. In fact, Sauron during the Second Age was more powerful than Morgoth at the end of the First Age. Here's a quote from Christopher Tolkien's Morgoth's Ring that offers an extended explanation. All right, let's see what they quote. Sauron was, quote, greater, effectively, in the Second Age than Morgoth at the end of the First. Why? Because though he was far smaller by natural stature, he had not yet fallen so low. Eventually, he also squandered his power of being in the endeavor to gain control of others, but he was not obliged to expend so much of himself. To gain domination over Arda, Morgoth had let most of his being pass into the physical constituents of the earth, hence all things that were born on earth and lived on and by it. Beasts or plants or incarnate spirits were liable to be stained. Sauron, however, inherited the corruption of Arda and only spent his much more limited power on the rings. Ooh, okay, that's just a chop of the actual thing. In light of that, Sauron would have been able to defeat Morgoth at the height of his power when Morgoth was at his lowest. However, When they were both at their best, Morgoth would have utterly destroyed Sauron. So it's a good thing that the Valar personally defeated Morgoth and left Sauron to the Astari, because if the Valar had only sent the Astari against Morgoth, they would have been trounced. So it's a good thing that the Valar personally defeated Morgoth and left Sauron to... Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, yes. Yes and no. It's a little bit more involved than that. I have the actual part of the quote that they sort of mentioned right here. It's right here. I have it. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yep. Right there. They're quoting Christopher Tolkien from Morgoth's Ring, and he says Sauron was greater effectively in the Second Age than Morgoth at the end of the First. Why? Because though he was far smaller by natural stature, he had not yet fallen so low. And he's referencing something there that they sort of left out here, which goes to sort of motivations and the way Sauron and Morgoth approached things and what was driving them to approach it. So I'll read like the full text of this. So what we got is Sauron was greater effectively in the Second Age than Morgoth at the end of the First. Why? Because though he was far smaller by natural stature, he had not yet fallen so low. Eventually, he also squandered his power of being in the endeavor to gain control of others. But he was not obliged to expend so much of himself. To gain domination over Arda, Morgoth had let most of his being pass into the physical constituents of the earth. Hence, all things that were born on earth and lived on and by it, beasts or plants or incarnate spirits, were liable to be stained. Morgoth, at the time of the War of the Jewels, had become permanently incarnate. For this reason, he was afraid, and waged the war almost entirely by means of devices or of subordinates and dominated creatures. Sauron, however, inherited the corruption of Arda and only spent his much more limited power on the rings, for it was the creatures of earth in their minds and wills that he desired to dominate. In this way, Sauron was also wiser than Melkor Morgoth. Sauron was not a beginner of discord, and he probably knew more of the music than did Melkor, whose mind had always been filled with his own plans and devices, and gave little attention to other things. The time of Melkor's greatest power, therefore, was in the physical beginnings of the world, a vast demiurgic lust for power, and the achievement of his own will and designs on a great scale. And later, after things had become more stable, Melkor was more interested in and capable of dealing with a volcanic eruption, for example, than with, say, a tree. It is indeed probable that he was simply unaware of the minor or more delicate productions of Yavanna, such as small flowers. Thus, as Morgoth, when Melkor was confronted by the existence of other inhabitants of Arda with other wills and intelligences, he was enraged by the mere fact of their existence, and his only notion of dealing with them was by physical force or the fear of it. His sole ultimate object was their destruction. Elves, and still more men, he despised because of their weakness. That is their lack of physical force or power over matter. But he was also afraid of them. He was aware, at any rate originally, when still capable of rational thought, that he could not annihilate them, that is, destroy their being, but their physical life. And incarnate form became increasingly, to his mind, the only thing that was worth considering. So, just to sort of touch on it here, they then go on further, and I'll get through this real quick for you guys. Or he became so far advanced in lying that he lied even to himself, and pretended that he could destroy them and rid Arda of them altogether. Hence his endeavor always to break wills and subordinate them to or absorb them into his own will and being before destroying their bodies. This was sheer nihilism, and negation its one ultimate object. Morgoth would, no doubt, if he had been victorious, have ultimately destroyed even his own creatures, such as the orcs, when they had served his sole purpose in using them, the destruction of elves and men. Melkor's final impotence and despair lay in this, that whereas the Valar, and in their degree elves and men, could still love Arda marred, that is, Arda with a Melkor ingredient, and could still heal this or that hurt, or produce from its very marring, from its state as it was, things beautiful and lovely, Melkor could do nothing with Arda, which was not from his own mind and was interwoven with the work and thoughts of others. Even left alone, he could only have gone raging on till all was leveled again into the formless chaos. And yet even so, he would have been defeated, because it would still have existed independent of his own mind and world, and a world in potential. Sauron had never reached this stage of nihilistic madness. He did not object to the existence of the world so long as he could do what he liked with it. He still had the relics of positive purposes that descended from the good of the nature in which he began. It had been his virtue, and therefore also the cause of his fall and of his relapse, that he loved order and coordination and disliked all confusion and wasteful friction. So, I'm going to stop there because, I'm sure you guys don't want to hear me read the whole darn book. So what we have there is so they're saying that Sauron was greater at the height of his power in the second era than Morgoth was at the end, at his lowest at the end of the first era, and like I said, I think they were coming at it from two completely different things. Ultimately, Morgoth's thing was, if I can't create it, it's trash, I will destroy it. That's ultimately what was Morgoth's motivation. Okay, either he created it or it didn't deserve to exist. Sauron was a little bit different, and it goes back to another video where I used the word save, and I had said I misspoke when I used the word save. Sauron's thing was, he thought, Arda was fine. He just thought that it would work, it would function if he was in charge of it. So he was all about just gaining control, and he was duplicitous in trying to do that. Whereas Morgoth was just like, hey, I'm the bad guy. You either, conform to my will or I will just break your shit. Whereas Sauron was like, I'm going to be a little slick about this. I'm going to make you conform to my will because you want to conform to my will, or you think you want to conform to my will. In other words, I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal and try to persuade you to do what I want you to do. It's if anybody ever saw the movie Labyrinth, David Bowie as the Goblin King Jareth has a great line where he says, "Love me, obey me, do as I say, and I will be your slave." That's sort of Sauron's approach to it. He's just like, hey, I'm just kind of here to help, and as long as you guys do what I want, I'll help. Whereas Morgoth was like, no, I didn't create this. I want to be able to create what I want to create, and if I didn't create this, ultimately I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to use it and then destroy it. So I wouldn't say that Sauron was greater. I think when they say, they use the quote where Christopher Tolkien was saying Sauron was greater effectively in the second age than Morgoth at the end of the first, because though he was smaller in stature, he had not yet fallen so low. I think what they're talking about was Sauron was greater because he still saw the value in Arda and its inhabitants, and he just sought to dominate them, whereas Morgoth had got to the point where his hatred was so great, he just wanted to destroy it all. It wasn't his, therefore he wanted to destroy it. And I think that's what Christopher was referencing in that Sauron was greater. I don't think he's meaning, like, as far as their, like, energy reserves for, like, to, like, duke it out. I don't think that's what was referencing. Ultimately, Melkor would always beat Sauron. Sauron was just a Maiar. Melkor was a Valar Ainur. Actually, Melkor was like the greatest of the Ainur, created by Eru Ilúvatar. There's no way Sauron, even on Melkor's worst day, would be able to, in a fight, as the article is saying, be able to take on Melkor. It's just, that's like saying, when my cat's sleeping, my hamster can beat it up. I guess from a technical standpoint, you might be right, but when reality kicks in, it's not going to happen. So I think that's what Christopher was talking about when he said Sauron was greater, was that Sauron never fell into that trap of I just want to destroy it all. He still saw the inherent value in Arda and its inhabitants, men and elves. He just felt that he needed to control them, whereas Morgoth, Melkor, felt that, hey, I didn't create it, therefore it's trash and I need to destroy it. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Yeah, again, everybody, like I said, we don't all have to agree, right? But let's keep it respectful. As long as we keep it respectful, the conversation's always good. Always like getting different perspectives. Keep the personal attacks out of it, okay? You know who you are. Let's keep the personal crap out of it. Just make your case. If your case is valid, people will like it. If your case has flaws, people will point them out. But let's not get personal, please. Okay? Yeah, so leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think Sauron was greater than Morgoth insofar as Sauron, because he was initially good, still seeing the value in Arda and elves and men, but just wanting to dominate them, versus Morgoth, who wanted to create so bad that if it wasn't his creation, he felt it should be destroyed? Let me know what you think, if that's something that made Sauron better, or if it's just a different version of evil. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, then like the video. Give it a thumbs up. Hit the bell for notifications. If you have not already, please I would ask that you consider subscribing. I'm going to try and do some more like deep lore video type things. I've been working on. I know I did that poll where I said, "What do you guys want me to talk about more?" And you guys said deep dive lore. And I'm working on a couple of ideas I got going on. One of them is well, I mean, I'll mention that one of them I want to talk about what was your gateway drug. And by gateway drug, no, I don't mean illicit drugs. What I mean gateway drugs, for me, it was Dungeons and Dragons, which led to Dragonlance, which led to Tolkien, which led to this whole in-depth fantasy thing. So I'm working on a video about that, and as well as getting into some deep dive lore with Tolkien and questions like this, and the difference between like Melkor and Sauron and their approach to the world. So anyway, if you have not subscribed already, hopefully you would consider doing it. I would appreciate it. It will help the channel. If you have subscribed and you are returning, thank you very much. You are awesome. And until the next one, I will see you all later. Peace and have a good one, you beautiful badasses.